Hi there, it's Florence here and I'm back again with another episode of my knitting video podcast. This is going to be a standard episode, so I'm going to show you any projects that I've finished recently, anything I'm currently working on, and then any new yarn that I've picked up. Before I jump into that, a couple of other things I want to mention first. Firstly, if you are interested in knitting the Mabel wrap, I'll put a picture of it here. It's a cardigan I knitted and showed on this podcast and talked about the progress of about a year ago, I guess. Well, I finally got around to uploading a pattern onto Ravelry. So if you'd like to knit this cardigan, there will be a link to the Ravelry page in the description, and I'll also put a discount code there since I also had a discount code when I first shared it on Instagram, so I'll make another one for my YouTube viewers as well. Secondly, I always like to mention what I'm wearing for anyone who's curious. This is the April cardigan by Petite Knit. I'm going to talk very minimally about this because I've worn this one so many times in my video. I even have a podcast episode where I talk a lot about this cardigan, which I think I just finished at the time, but also the same cardigan in brown that I knitted quite a few years ago. So you can find that by looking for a podcast episode where there's a picture of this cardigan in the thumbnail. It's a Petite Knit pattern, it's very popular and for good reason. If you're looking for a very plain V-neck, fairly fitted cardigan, this one is my top recommendation. This one is modified to have a double knitted button band. I think the original pattern has a ribbed button band, but it's an easy modification to make. And mine is knitted in Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Marzipan, and Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the colour Putty. I think it's that way around. It's a lovely yarn combination I've used for a lot of things. It wears really beautifully. I've worn this cardigan a lot. I probably wear it like once a week, and there's next to no pilling on it, despite it having been worn that much for like a year and a half now. It's a great cardigan. I really recommend it. Okay, that was fairly efficient, I think, and with that out of the way, I'm going to move on to talk about my finished object. I only have one like finished object to show today, and it's this one, which I'm sure you have seen before because this thing has been on my needles for over a year? Roughly a year, I think. So I finally have it, give or take, finished and can show it to you. You know, when I hold it up like that, it really doesn't look that cute. I promise it's a lot cuter when it's being worn. I will try to record some B-roll footage of me wearing it so that you can get the idea. It is a great fit and that's something I'm particularly happy with, so I really want to be able to show that in particular rather than just holding up this sad, unblocked looking thing. Where do I start? Let's talk about the yarn. The yarn that I use for this top is this one. This is Brushlight by Cardiff Cashmere. It is a cashmere and silk blend that's structured a little bit like silk mohair, so it has a silk core and then a bit of a cashmere halo around it. The silk core is thicker than silk mohair, and it's a little more chunky and uneven, this yarn, compared to a silk mohair. I knitted with one strand of this on 3.5mm needles, and it gives a fairly opaque fabric. It's definitely got a tiny bit of translucency to it, which I like. It's very pretty, but it's something that it's not hard to find underwear to wear with it, if that makes any sense. The colour that I have is called Mose or Mose, I'm never sure. It's a colour that I've used quite a few times now. It's one of my favourite colours that Cardiff Cashmere make. It's a lovely teal green that's not too strong, like it's a little bit muted. It's very pretty and I think it pairs well with a lot of stuff. I've mentioned before I am thinking about working on a pattern for this top, and so I will have to do some investigation into like what other yarn combinations would work well for this. This yarn is quite expensive. I'll put the yardage here, but this is like 15 or so pounds a ball. So it did end up being quite a pricey project. I think I got it slightly discounted. I think I spent about £90 on this and another project, and I didn't use all of the yarn. So it's nothing crazy, but I appreciate this yarn is quite unique. It's not available everywhere, and it's also certainly not in everybody's budgets. So I want to try a couple of other possible options. One would be that sort of Surrey alpaca silk mohair that you tend to buy from hand dyers. It's a little harder to find it from sort of large yarn brands that dye commercially, so I might have to go find some just to swatch. But it tends to be the case that those alpaca silks are a little bit thicker than silk mohair, and so I think they might be more comparable to the Brushlight than silk mohair would be. I think 2 strands of silk mohair would be a little bit too thick, but something else that I might try is maybe 1 strand of silk mohair with 1 strand of some non-mohair lace weight, so a cashmere lace weight or else an alpaca lace weight. I think something like that might work well as well. So here is the blouse. It has a square neckline. It doesn't look super square now that I'm holding it up, but I promise it's a square neckline. It has a little keyhole on the front with a tie. And then it has, I think, basically a peplum. I always hate calling it a peplum because it gives me flashbacks to like when peplums were a thing in like 2013 or something. And I really don't look back on that time particularly fondly, but I think this is quite pretty. So it has this I-cord running around the middle of the body, and then it has little gathers underneath that. And the I-cord is only attached to the front of the top, so if I turn it around, you can see there is no I-cord around the waist on the back. And instead you take the I-cord from the front and you tie it in the back so you can make it fit your waist however you want it to. It has very short puff sleeves, so they gather at the bottom a little bit here, and they also gather at the top. I think that's kind of all of the key design points that I have going on here. The gathering and the puff sleeveness is the reason why this doesn't look particularly blocked. I'm kind of undecided on what the best strategy will be for blocking this. I worry that if I block it, I'll end up blocking out a lot of the gathering that I like so much, particularly on the back of the waist where it has the same rapid increases to give the gathered look as it has on the front of the waist where there's I-cord, but there's no I-cord to hold those gathers in place, if that makes any sense. So I worry that if I block it, I'll almost be able to block out the little creases and folds you get and make it look really smooth, and that's not what I want. I want to have that little gather there, so I'm a little bit worried about that. I also don't really know how to block the sleeves. Like, I don't want to block the sleeves flat. Again, I want them gathered at the top and bottom. I've said the word gathered too many times now. And so all I did was I blocked the bottom part, like from here down, and that left everything else as is for now. This bottom part had to be blocked because, I don't know if you can see, I opted to use garter stitch to finish the edge. I thought that obviously rib wouldn't give it that cute flared out look that I wanted. I-cord might honestly look quite nice, but I wasn't sure if it would have too much of a tendency to flip up. I figured that garter is a very sort of light way to finish an edge, and kind of looks like a lacy hem or something from a distance, which I quite like for this piece. The only thing is, it does have a real tendency to flip up, and so I did have to block it just to force it to lie flat, and it is behaving very well now. Like, I don't have any problems with it flipping up like I sometimes do with, for example, double knitted edges. I wasn't so worried about the I-cord flipping up for the sleeves, for example, because they cinch in, like there's more fabric around here, and then there are rapid decreases before you put the I-cord on, so it's not going to flip up because like it would have to go against all of that fabric that is being pulled into that I-cord bind off. That's a horrible description, but you see what I mean. Like, this isn't going to flip out like the bottom edge perhaps would. Oh yeah, another struggle that I had with this, it's very hard to talk about the difficulties I had with this project because I've had it on the go for so long, and I can't really remember what my struggles were like a year ago. But I did have some issues with connecting new balls of yarn midway through. Because the fabric that I'm getting is slightly sheer, it is fairly obvious if you have like double thickness woven in ends. You can't really splice the ends together particularly. I mean, the cashmere felts a little bit, and that is what I ended up trying to do because I just commit to trying to splice every type of yarn together, even if it's clearly not a yarn that works for it. And that does give some slightly chunky looking places. I don't know if you can see. Like, I connected a new end here, and you can see the silk is a little bit thicker, and it is a tiny bit visible. To be honest, I'm hoping that a lot of this will go away if I do block the body. And what I'm hoping to do maybe is like get a spray bottle and spritz the areas that I don't mind blocking flat so that I can just block those parts lightly without blocking the sleeves or the waistline. I know a lot of people really like steam blocking, and that's not something I've ever tried or thought about. So do let me know either if you have experienced steam blocking and whether you think it would be useful for garments like this, or if you know the best way to like seamlessly attach a new ball of yarn if you're using mohair, silk alpaca, anything like that. Because I've never really found a good way to do it, and yeah, I'm open to suggestions. Okay, I think I'm going to stop talking about this. I think that's sort of everything I wanted to say about it. I don't really have a pattern to comment on because it was something that I just knitted freehand. I mean, I'm quite happy with how it turned out given it was knitted freehand. The only part that I actually had to go back and redo was the I-cord around the neck. I think I mentioned this before. This is the reason it took me a year, because I put I-cord around the whole neckline, and I used a too large needle, so the neckline was really saggy and it wasn't very flattering. And so I knew that I'd have to take off that I-cord and redo it. And I kept putting it off because I hate ripping out knitting. I'm not really a perfectionist. I tend to just get things done and start wearing them. So this thing just sat abandoned for a year waiting for me to get around to it. And I ended up doing it a couple of nights ago and it took like half an hour and it just wasn't a huge deal. So hopefully I've learned my lesson and we'll revisit some more projects. I do have other pieces that have been sitting in progress for longer than this. What should I talk about next? Should we talk about this one or a sock? So these are work in progress pieces, but I feel like they're like the interesting kind of work in progress pieces where I've actually done a lot and I have a lot to talk about. I guess we'll jump straight in with this one because I think this is the most exciting piece in the video, more exciting than the finished object. Maybe that's just me, but I have been loving working on this. So you might remember I've spoken about this in a few episodes, so if you watch frequently you probably will have heard me speak about it before. I got a book of Norwegian official jumpers that were designed for skiing world championships and Winter Olympics. Actually, I think the book only has the World Championship ones, but there are patterns available online for the Winter Olympic ones as well, and this is one of the Winter Olympic ones. This is the Albertville 1992, I think, Winter Olympic jumper. I don't know what you'd call it. So it's an old pattern from the 90s. I've had some very lovely messages on Instagram from people who say that they knitted this jumper in the 90s and that it's still going strong, so that's very cool to read. Like, hopefully this will become a little bit of an heirloom piece for me. And I'm slightly obsessed with these jumpers and I really want to knit not just this one, but more of them as well. I did manage to make an Instagram group chat with about 30 people who are all knitting these ridiculous chunky ski sweaters in April. It's now May, I'm still going. And I think we're all having a really good time. It's a lot of new stuff. I've done a decent amount of colourwork before. I think I'm a fairly proficient colourwork knitter. However, I haven't done ever somehow a jumper that's like all over colourwork, so that was a first for me. This is constructed in a very traditional way that I think is quite typical of a lot of these Norwegian jumpers, where the body is just a big tube, right? And then you steek for armholes. Everything is knitted bottom up. I have done a lot of modifications, which I will talk about now. So firstly, I didn't really follow the pattern for the body. The way the body is written in the pattern is that you cast on a smaller number of stitches, you increase out, so it has like a narrower waist and then heads out towards the shoulders. I feel like that is a very vintage look and might feel slightly dated. I wanted this jumper to be very straight up and down, so I just picked a stitch count that wasn't actually a stitch count that's used for any of the sizes, and I just knitted a large tube. So what I have here is just a tube. I knitted it bottom up, so starting with this ribbing, and then I just followed the charts in the pattern. A lot of these patterns are much easier to come by in Norwegian than in English. So if you don't speak Norwegian, I think it's actually easier than you would expect it to be, since the actual process of knitting the jumper is so simple. They don't have a lot of shaping, and most of it is charted. Like, most of the important content in the pattern is charts, and so that doesn't really have a language barrier. The way the neckline is supposed to work is you switch to knitting flat and cast off stitches to shape the neckline as you're knitting the body. Again, I really don't like knitting colourwork flat, so I modified it, and I just knitted like a straight tube. So there's no neck shaping here. This is just a big tube that is open at the top. And the game plan here is to steek the neck shaping. So in other words, I'm going to sew like a scoop shape for the neck. I think my game plan is to machine sew and then needle felt the edge to really keep it together, just so it's a little easier to manage and the yarn isn't so loose, and then cut it. I'm more concerned about the neckline steek than the armhole steek. I think when you're following a lot of steeked knitting patterns that are not like vintage Norwegian patterns, you'll end up having sort of columns of alternating coloured stitches on either side of the steek to sort of lock the ends of the yarn in place after cutting. These patterns don't tend to have that. The pattern continues all around the jumper, and so you will have quite long loose ends after cutting, and I think that's what I'm hoping the needle felting will help manage that. Ultimately, knitting doesn't unravel that much if you do a vertical cut. So the sleeves, they could sort of gradually pull loose, but I think the steek will be fine. The neckline worries me more because knitting does unravel if you cut horizontally, right? Like if you cut knitting like this, then it will all unravel. And that front section of the collar is essentially a horizontal cut, which I think will be more likely to have issues with falling apart than the vertical sleeve steeks will. I'm not that worried about it. I think once I've machine sewed it, it will probably be fine even before the needle felting. A lot of people have stitched jumpers in this way. It's not like a new technique or anything. So I'm optimistic it will be okay, but I'm definitely a little bit more intimidated by that than by the armhole steeks. Clearly not intimidated enough to knit colourwork flat though, so yes. Now I do have some worries about this. The width of the body, I obviously have it folded here, I think is kind of okay. I picked a stitch count that based on my gauge would give me a body circumference that matches some of my favourite slightly oversized boxy jumpers. So that part seems alright. Although it's kind of hard to tell how it's going to sit because this fabric is very different in character to the plain stockinette jumpers that I have. Because it is all over colourwork, it's a lot more structured than plain stockinette would be, even with a similar or even thicker yarn. And I think that will change the way that the body sits quite a bit. Now, these jumpers have no shoulder shaping, and a lot of my jumpers are very straight up and down and boxy, but I don't have many that don't have any shaping at all in terms of angling the shoulder downwards. This one is straight across. And I think that tends to work better, in my opinion, when a jumper is very oversized. The more fitted a jumper gets, the more of a problem it seems to be for the fit when you have things like no shoulder shaping or a sleeve that's just a straight tube. I'll talk more about the sleeves in a second. So yes, I'm hoping it will be okay. It's quite intimidating. I won't know till I've cut it, and by that point there's no turning back. I am hoping that it will be lovely and I'll be really happy with the result, but I guess I'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, the game plan will be like 3 needle bind off or something to attach the shoulders. And before I'll do that, I'll make sure I steek the armholes, and then I will steek the neckline and put a collar on. Now, the sleeves, I'm also not really following the pattern for at all. So I'll show you what I have here. The sleeves for this jumper are supposed to be knitted bottom up. So you start with the cuff and knit up. I'm very reluctant to do that simply because I don't know how long I'm going to want the sleeves. It's very hard to tell because I don't know how high the sleeve will sit on my arm. And even if I have a jumper that I like the fit of and the body is the same width as the body of that jumper, the sleeve might not be the same length because this fabric is, as I said, so much sturdier and stiffer and has such a different character. And so I don't really know where that top of the sleeve will sit and therefore how long I need to knit it. I'm a fairly short person, so I can't really trust patterns to work out for me in terms of having the perfect sleeve length if I just follow the measurements in the pattern. And so what I've decided to do is knit the sleeves top down. I don't think this is going to be a problem. Obviously on the colourwork design, all of the stitches will be pointing the opposite way. I don't think that I care about this personally. I mean, this is my first one of these jumpers, right? So if I don't like it in the end, I'll take it as a learning experience and use that to improve the project for next time. But yes, I've knitted the sleeve from the top down, and I've actually only knitted half the sleeve and then I put the stitches on hold and blocked it. And so I plan to steek and attach this half sleeve in this state. I haven't yet made the second one, but I'll do it in the same way. And then from that point I can take these stitches off hold and knit the rest of the sleeve top down, and at that point everything will be blocked and assembled and I can really try it on and see how long I need those sleeves to be. So that part I am not too concerned about. I think that will work out fine. What I'm more worried about for the sleeves is the fit of them in terms of like the fabric underneath the arm. These jumpers again all seem to have a very similar sleeve shape, which is just sort of thin at the wrist, tapers out with increases underneath the arm to be wide where it's attached to the jumper. And sometimes I think this gives a lot of fabric underneath the arm, which doesn't look too great. And as I was working on this project, I was thinking a lot about what I could do to help relieve this issue a bit, and I'm coming out blank a little bit. So this is pretty much knitted pattern. I think I did a slightly different stitch count because the sleeves were going to be really, really wide, so I made it a little smaller than even the smallest size. I don't really know what size my body corresponds to, given I didn't use any of the stitch counts. But where was I going with this? Yes, I have knitted this pretty much to pattern, so you can see how it looks. This is the top edge of the sleeve, which is straight, and then you can see along this bottom edge there are increases, so it's much wider here where it's going to attach to the jumper. I didn't change needle sizes when I was doing rounds without colour work, so this edge actually flares out even more because the last few rounds here don't include any colour work, and my gauge is quite different when I'm knitting not in colour work. So maybe that was a mistake. My thoughts that I was having were do something like short rows or use steeking to shape the top of the sleeve. And the problem with that is that the top of the sleeve has this design, like this motif that goes all the way around. And I really like how this looks, so I don't want to do a sleeve that has an angle to it like this, because then this design will be cut off at an angle and I don't think that's going to look that cute. So my game plan for this is to try putting the sleeve in as specified in the pattern. So just put it in like this, and I'm just going to see if this fabric here bothers me. If it does, my backup plan is to take the sleeve out and flip it upside down and put it in this way, because this shape is actually, I think, a lot better. This is now angled the way a sleeve should be angled, right? With this longer edge on the top of the arm. The problem with that is that the top edge is where the decreases are, and it's also where the beginning of round is. Now, if I had had this plan when I started knitting the sleeve, I would have put the beginning of round on the opposite edge to the decreases. So the beginning of round would be underneath the arm, and therefore the little step in the colour work would be underneath the arm, because I don't think the decreases actually look that bad. It's mostly the beginning of round that bothers me. However, I did not think that through before I started, and so it's all going on here. And so if I put the sleeve in this way, I'll have the decreases and the beginning of round super visible, and I don't know if that will bother me. I was thinking, I guess I'll show you what it looks like so you guys can gauge whether it would bother you. So this is what the top of the sleeve looks like if I put it in with the decreases on the top. So it does look a bit weird because I'm decreasing in the colourwork pattern, but also it has that beginning of round step to it. I don't know. I was thinking about different things, like I could do a crochet chain down the top of the sleeve in the dark blue, so it looks like there's a seam, which would look quite nice, and I think it might make the step less visible. So I have a lot of ideas like that I could try. I'm just not completely sure any of them will give exactly the look that I want. It's annoying because now I have the option to like knit the other sleeve the same way as this one so they match, or knit the other sleeve with the beginning of round here so that it's better but they don't match, and I don't yet know what I'm going to do. We will see. But overall I think one of those things will work, and next time I make one of these jumpers I'll have a much better idea of how I like to do these things and hopefully won't make any of these mistakes. I'm finding the sleeves a lot less enjoyable to knit. I'm not a great colourwork knitter because I am an English style knitter. I'm not the most competent continental style knitter. I do knit colourwork two-handed so as not to suffer with like having to put each strand down and pick up the other one when I want to use a different colour. So I knit with one strand continental and one strand English, and I don't know exactly what it is. Like when I'm knitting large circumference, like body on long needles, I find it super comfortable. I don't really have to think about it. It's really easy. But the minute I go to magic loop, I start finding it a lot less comfortable. I think because like the hand that is doing continental has to move from like having the knitting go around it to sometimes sitting outside the knitting as I reach the end of a half round in magic loop. And so I have to like change my grip a lot, and it just feels a lot less fluid and it's a lot less comfortable. What I will say is these sleeves are really flying by. This is actually knitted at quite a large gauge. It's DK weight. I think it's supposed to be about 24 stitches. I haven't checked how close this is. So it's a pretty fast knit, and I am having a great time with it. I hope that by the next episode this jumper will be done, but we'll have to wait and see. I will also mention the yarn that I am using for this. I did speak about it before, but I'm using Jensen from isager. I bought it mostly all with my own money, but I will say the white was left over from a test knit I did some time ago where the yarn was sponsored. So like the white is gifted for a different project. I will put all of the colours in the description because I don't know them all off the top of my head. They all have like colour numbers and letters, which I don't really recall, but this is a navy blue. I don't know if it shows up well on camera or if it looks black. It's navy blue and then white, and then for the colour work I also go through a plum red, a bright red, a teal green colour, and then a grey. Oh yeah, I will also say, especially on the body, the top colorwork motif is simplified quite a lot, just because I wasn't too sure how long the body would end up being. I was worried it was going to be too long, and so I was really panicking as I was getting towards the top and like dropping rows anywhere I could. So the motif isn't the same as it is in the pattern because I actually skipped a lot of rounds in it. Yeah, the yarn is a DK weight, sort of. I'd say it's a relatively light DK weight. Something I've noticed is it actually varies a lot between colours. This mid-grey that I'm using is really thin. It kind of feels like a fingering weight, whereas the white is quite plush, quite chunky, and is like a very true DK weight. You can't really tell when you look at the finished piece though, so it doesn't bother me too much. It's a very beautiful yarn that I like a lot. I think it is spun in Denmark, and it uses both European wool for a lot of the darker and more natural colours, as well as New Zealand wool for the white. I think it's very expensive for what it is, so if you're on a budget, I would skip it. I think there's a lot of kind of similar woolly wool that you can get for a lot less money. But it is good yarn. I really do like it, and I will probably use it again now that I have a bit more money to spend on my knitting projects. Okay, I think that is just about everything for the Albertville 1992 jumper. I have 2 more work in progress pieces that I'm going to show, and I will go first of all for the sock. I didn't show this in the last episode because I showed it in the episode before and I hadn't made any progress. I cast this sock on quite a while ago. I think I cast it on to take on like a work trip to Stockholm because I was a little concerned about both my bag weight limit, but also about having my needles taken away at the airport. But I knitted a lot of it on the plane and then I kind of left it when I got back. And I've now sat down and at least finished the first sock, so I haven't yet cast on the second and I need to do that soon. The yarn that I'm using for this sock is from Rico. It's one of their luxury sock yarns. I want to say it's the silk one, but from memory I was trying to figure out what colour it was and I couldn't figure out for sure what colour. I bought this a very long time ago and the label is long gone, and I couldn't even find my order confirmation, so I will try and track it down and put it in the description, but no guarantees. It's a very nice sock yarn. This one is very, very soft. It's much softer than the Rico luxury socks with bamboo, which I used for another pair of lace socks last summer. And they're a very beige colour, which honestly, it's a very pretty colour and I like it a lot. But when I'm wearing them, it looks very, very close to my skin tone. Like, this doesn't look like a cream sock, this looks like a nude sock. And I think it would look better if you weren't the same colour as the socks. So not the most flattering colour for me, but it is very pretty. The pattern that I am using for this is one by Yucca. I've knitted a lot of socks from patterns by Yucca. This one is from the pattern Urara, or at least it sort of is. Urara is a toe-up sock. I don't like knitting toe-up socks, and I just couldn't be bothered to do it. Like, most of the time if I have a pattern and it's toe-up, I'll just like go ahead and knit it toe-up. But for this project, because I was taking it with me on holiday, I was really craving some cuff down sock knitting, and so I just decided to knit it cuff down. If you're interested in the actual like pattern for this sock, I basically used the exact method of making socks that is in my pattern called Petal Drop Socks that you can find on Ravelry. There is like a discount code in the description of that pattern so that you can get it for free if you're interested in looking at the way that I usually make socks. That one has an all over lace design, but if you just like ignore the lace chart and do stockinette where it says to do lace, that's my standard vanilla sock method, I guess. And so I basically use exactly that here in terms of how I did the heel and toe and all of that. But I did stockinette on the back of the leg and then the chart from the Urara pattern on the front of the leg and the front of the foot. Now, this is a very, I don't know how to describe it, like directional lace. Like, it looks very different when you flip it upside down. And because I'm knitting it cuff down, the entire lace pattern is flipped upside down from how it is in the original pattern. I think it would be kind of annoying to try and change it to make it go the same way, but I like it this way, so that is fine, right? Like, I'll just knit the second sock the same way and I think they'll look cute. These sort of lace triangles just point upwards instead of downwards. I really fell in love with this sock pattern after I saw one of these socks in Valentina's yarn shop. It's called My Ivory Room in Chiswick, where she has like a display of sock yarn. There's one of the Urara socks knitted and displayed, and it looks really cute. I actually really hated it the first time I saw this pattern because I thought the lace looked really blocky, but it's somehow really grown on me and now I think it's super cute. I recently bought a pair of sandals, specifically hoping to wear them with hand knitted socks in the summer. I picked out fisherman style sandals with like closed toe and closed heel for that purpose, and I think they look really cute. So I need to knit the other one of these socks so that I can wear them with my new sandals. The difficulty is going to be that because I didn't really follow the pattern at all, it's going to be very hard to make the second sock look exactly the same. I should really have taken better notes as I was working through it in terms of like what round I started on, what round I started doing the heel flap on. I mean, as long as it's roughly correct, and I can tell by glancing at it if it's roughly correct, I think it will look fine. But yeah, the less you follow a pattern, the more you have to make notes about what you did, and that was definitely lacking here. So yeah, yarn is nice. The sock is obviously very enjoyable to knit. I like doing lace, and this is my favourite sock pattern with the nice lace chart, so the best of both worlds. I really like patterns by Yucca, so even if you're knitting the original Urara sock, obviously I haven't knitted it so I can't comment on it. However, I have knitted like probably 10 or so Yucca sock patterns, and they are without exception like brilliant. They are very thoroughly written. Like if they do use, for example, that technique where the different sizes come from using different gauges instead of using different stitch counts, then there will be proper tables in the pattern telling you exactly what gauge to get to give each size. There are a lot of great like diagrams. I think they're great patterns. If you want to knit fancy socks, Yucca is my top recommended sock designer, and I will definitely be knitting more of her patterns. I have a few that I want to get started on soon. Okay, I'm going to show my last work in progress. This was also a work in progress in my last video, and I know it looks like I haven't made very much progress on it. In my defense, I have been in Poland for a week since the last video. I went to Warsaw on just a little holiday, I guess. It was very lovely, but I did bring a needle that didn't fit my cable, and so I was unable to knit for the entire week. Warsaw doesn't seem to have a lot in the way of yarn shops, so I couldn't even go and buy something while I was there. And so I had a full week without knitting, and that's why my progress has been a little bit limited since the last episode. Anyway, ad yarn sponsored. This yarn was sent to me for a test knit. The pattern was sent to me for the test knit as well. I think this pattern's going to be released pretty soon, so obviously I'm looking like a bad test knitter because I haven't finished. My excuse for this is that the yarn was actually sent not to my address, it was sent to an incorrect address, and it took me a really long time to track down the yarn, so I ended up starting the test knit very, very late. And my second excuse is that this top has a 72 row gauge. 72 rows per 10 centimeters. For those of you who are not familiar with gauges, like that's double the number of rows in like a small gauge summer top or something, roughly. It's kind of crazy. So I don't want to just copy everything I said in the last episode. I'll give you a very brief summary. This is a pattern by Ullin Knitwear. It's called the Swan Blouse, and today I think she described it as a structured short sleeve blouse. It's made with a single strand of mohair, although the needles are not that small. I think it's 4mm needles that I'm using. And it uses a tuck stitch all over. So you sort of knit 6 rows, and then you knit the first row together with the 6th row to create a horizontal pleat all the way across the fabric. So you basically have to knit 6 rows and then group them all together into one single row, and that's why it takes so many rows to make any significant amount of progress on this top. So you can really see how that pleated texture looks. It's really pretty. Since the last episode, I did join the body in the round, so this is now a very mindless piece of knitting to do, which is nice. I just have to remember every 6th row to knit my live stitches together with 6 rows ago's live stitches. I will also mention it's rib, so it's the tuck stitch, but it's also all over rib. And I also put the collar on, which is really nice because I think it really starts to make it look like a top, like you get a little look at what it's going to end up like, which feels really good. And I think this is going to be super pretty. My only thing about it is like, I don't know what season you wear a piece like this. It's a short sleeve blouse, so it needs to be fairly warm, but like, mohair is strictly the least comfortable thing to wear when it gets very hot. Probably weather around now, it's like 20-ish degrees in the UK at the moment. I think that is probably okay. So it's a shame that I'm going to be finishing this spring piece as the weather gets too hot. I guess I will wear it a lot in September. So yes, I'm really enjoying that, and if you're interested, you should check out the pattern because I think it is being released fairly soon if it hasn't been released already. I will put the name and designer in the description so it's easy to find as usual. The yarn that I'm using for it is this one. This is, as I said, gifted by Isager, who sponsor a lot of Ullin Knitwear's test knits. This is the Isager silk mohair. I don't have a lot to say about this. It's a very standard silk mohair that I've spoken about a lot of times in my podcast. It is a really great silk mohair though. This one definitely has my recommendation if you're looking for a very soft silk mohair. I think this is one of the softest. So it is 212 meters, 75% mohair and 25% silk. And this color I really love. It's called Zero. So E0 is the cream, and that's like a very standard cream. But this one that's just called Zero, not E0, is it's like a very cool cream. Like a little grayish or a little pinkish. It's not like yellow cream. And I think this is like a very beautiful color. Not dissimilar to my cardigan, which I think has kind of a similar vibe. It's really pretty. Okay, this is definitely a shorter episode. Nothing wrong with that. It's good to be uploading frequently, even if I don't have that much to go through. I feel like I really sped through a lot of my work in progress pieces. I do have a little bit of yarn to show, honestly not that much. And it's all sock yarn, but I'll go ahead and show it to you. So I've really been getting back into knitting socks lately. I used to knit a lot of socks. I think I made maybe about 20 pairs of socks last year, quite a few. And then I really haven't done so many this year. They're one of my favorite things to work in the summer. I find that they're quite comfortable to knit. Like that kind of superwash merino doesn't stick to your hands very much, and so it's very comfortable to knit in hot weather. It's also just a really great portable project. And I also would like to release more sock patterns, so it would be nice to design some more socks. I have bought sock yarn for 4 pairs of socks, which I don't think is unreasonable. I actually have almost run out of sock yarn. I bought a lot when I first started knitting a lot of socks about 1.5 years ago, and I've pretty much worked through it. So I thought it'd be nice to treat myself to some more. This is the first one I got. This I bought at the Woolhound, which is a local yarn shop in the Oxford Covered Market. It's very lovely, it's quite a small shop, and as far as I know, they don't sell online. So if you're interested, you know, do check it out when you're in Oxford. I showed this on my Instagram and a lot of people were really intrigued by it. It's Regia 4-ply, which is a really great super standard wool nylon sock yarn, 75% wool, 25% polyamide. I really like Regia sock yarn. I've used it before. It's very basic, it's very cheap, and it's just good. What makes this one in particular fun, and this is not going to show up on camera, is it? It's a really interesting color. So it's baby pink, but it has like a lot of rainbow in it. Maybe if I go even closer, you can see. Baby pink, but with rainbow. It's really pretty. And it's a very muted pink color as well, so it's something that I think will be easy to pair with things. This color is 06840, if that's helpful at all. To be honest, this sort of dusty pink isn't really my color. I really wish that they did this rainbow effect in different colored bases. Like if this was a blue or a beige or a cream, that would be so cute, I think. And then I also bought 3 hanks of hand-dyed sock yarn. I'm not like typically the biggest hand-dyed yarn fan, but I do often use hand-dyed sock yarn. I find that because I wear very plain stockinette garments in very muted neutral colors the most, socks are my opportunity to knit more cables, more lace, more fun stuff. I actually have some very exciting socks planned soon. Let's just say I'm expecting to delve into colorwork socks soon, and I'm really looking forward to it. Anyway, when I'm knitting a plain sock, sometimes it is nice to use hand-dyed, but I do tend to lean towards very plain hand-dyed, like one color with speckles or one color with a very small amount of variation. So back when I lived with my parents, my best local yarn shop was quite a long way from where I lived actually. It was in a little town called Hadleigh, which is where my grandparents are living, and it is a very quiet market town which weirdly has an amazing yarn shop. It's a beautiful town. If you're in Suffolk, I would recommend visiting. The yarn shop there is called Worx, and at the time it was on an industrial estate, but it's since moved to be on the high street, so it's a lot more accessible. And they sell a really very good selection of Scandinavian yarn for a tiny yarn shop in very rural England. Even when I was at Cambridge for uni, there was a much better selection at Yarnworks than anywhere in Cambridge. They sell Knitting for Olive, Sanniscan, Filcolana. I feel like I never see Filcolana in shops in the UK, to be honest, anywhere else. They also have a wildly good selection of hand-dyed yarn, which they've been selling for a very long time. And recently, I think I'm hopefully not spreading false information here, I believe the owners of the shop have started dyeing their own yarn. And so I thought I'd pick some up to try because it looks very pretty. There are a lot of very bright and variegated colour options, but I obviously went for bland ones because that's what I'm going to wear. Okay, so this is Squishy Sock by Market Town Yarns. It is 85% superwash merino, 15% nylon, so it feels quite typical of like hand-dyed sock yarn. 400 meters per 100 grams. This first one is in a color called Hold That Thought, which you probably think looks white, but if I hold it a little closer, it's speckled with green and pink, which I think is really cute, and it totally reminds me of spring. It's like strawberries and cream, you know? It's very sweet, and the speckles are subtle enough that I think this would still look really pretty with lace or cables. So I think this will work for a lot of different sock styles that I like to knit. This one is called Hickory, and it's a proper basic brown, but it does have that sort of slight variation to the colour that you get with hand-dyed yarn. I think this will work really well for some socks for winter, and this is definitely something that you can do lace in particular in, and I think it will look really good. So I expect to knit some lace socks maybe later on in the summer with this. And then I did go for one proper like variegated one because I thought this was so pretty I couldn't not pick it up. The colour is called Storm Cloud. And you can see it's like a blue and orange. To be honest, it's quite a warm sock yarn for me, but I think I knitted a couple of pairs of socks last year in kind of similar colours to this, and I really like them and wear them a lot. I realised I tend to reach the most for socks that are either cream, if I'm wearing like beige trainers or sandals, or very dark coloured socks if I'm wearing leather boots, and they're the shoes I normally wear, so I've been trying to build up more of these like brownish coloured socks. This one would definitely, in my opinion, look best with like a slip stitch pattern or something quite plain like that. And again, this is probably something I'll knit up a little bit later in the summer, ready for winter when I'm wearing boots a lot more. So I think that is everything. That is my one finished object. I think that's everything I currently have in progress. I do have another pair of socks on the go, but they're sitting there until I finish the first pair. And I will hopefully be back again soon with another episode. I really hope I have that ski sweater done by then, and I'm going to try and film all of the steeking process in case that's interesting to any of you guys, partly because it's a little bit experimental and I'm not sure how it's going to go, so maybe it will be interesting and dramatic viewing, or maybe it will all go very smoothly. Time will tell. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back again soon with another episode, and goodbye.